Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Community of Learners for today. This is our last session of the academic year, and CPLA, Christian Perspectives of the Liberal Arts, we are a committee that strives as best we can to help infuse all of our general education classes with the spirit of the concept, integration of faith and learning, critical participation. The perspective for our learning is Jesus Christ. And so we are a community of learners all together, and I want to welcome you all and thank you for coming. There are Hinckley's Donuts at the back, so feel free to sneak out if you haven't gotten any. And what a wonderful day. And I hate to say this is like, I don't know, you're a parent talking about your kids and having a favorite. You're not supposed to. But I do believe, in a way, we have saved the best for last this year. Dr. Patton, tremendous man. I know he's dear to so many of your hearts as you've gotten to know him as a professor, as a friend, as a mentor. And so we're just thrilled, Paul, that you are here. There's so many things that I could say. Maybe the bad news is this, as I'm looking around, as I'm looking at myself, I don't think there are many Paul Pattons here. I don't think that many of us have that in our future. In terms of his wisdom, his accomplishments, and achievements, you know he has, well, first of all, his time here as an undergraduate, sitting in your chairs here at Spring Arbor, and then coming back after ministry, after advanced degrees, PhD, and starting here at Spring Arbor in 2010 on the faculty. And the kind of wisdom that he brings is unique. The kind of experience, the scholarship, the books that he's written, the I would say screenplays, probably screenplays, but certainly theatrical productions, film, radio. He is unique, and you know that. But I want to say this is the good news, that each one of us does have the opportunity to be like Dr. Patton in this specific way. You know him as a man of humility. You know him as a man of integrity. And what I want to highlight here is something that I think if you know him, you'll recognize this. Dr. Patton is a man who gives attention to people, to his craft, to the field of study. I can't imagine, having lunch with Paul at the DC and carrying on a conversation and him looking at his phone at the same time while I'm trying to talk. That's not Paul. Or maybe when he's working on memorizing scripture, he's binging on Netflix at the same time and looking at. If you do that, it won't lower my esteem for you. I'd have a hard time seeing that. But it's just this. Paul gives, he will let you feel like you are the only person in the room when you're talking with him, and he gives that attention to scripture, to his students, to his colleagues. You know why? I believe it's because of his love. And love of God is shown in his attentiveness, his careful study of scripture, his memorization, and love of his students and colleagues, that he spends time and truly lets me feel that we are seen and valued and loved. So many of you know that Dr. Patton will be retiring from full-time faculty status after this semester. And I'm very sad about that, but we are going to see him on campus next year as an artist in residence, perhaps even teaching some. But it is a milestone here, Paul, and we're thrilled to hear from you and to celebrate and say thank you. And part of that, I've asked if Dr. Kono, our university chaplain, would come up, and Paul, would you come up as well? And Dr. Kono would like to offer a prayer.
Gracious Father, we come before you grateful for the way that you move in us and through us, grateful for those who go before us. We're grateful for the great cloud of witnesses who attest to your goodness in their lives. And Paul Patton is one who has gone before us, who is among us, who has become, as it says in Ephesians, an imitator of God, one who is dearly loved. And Paul not only has embodied that as he's memorized your word and allowed it to become a part of his life, but as he is invested in all of us in some way, whether modeling love, modeling humility. He has just become Christ among us. And for that, we're grateful. In this time, as he shares, would you just use his words and his expertise and his wisdom, all those gifts you've given to him, would you use them to inspire us, to help us see the world in a different way, maybe even to see the world through your eyes in a different way? Would you use him and his wisdom to inspire us to be better people, to be better students, to be better children of God? Bless him as he moves on to this next phase of his life. Give him strength and an increase in wisdom. Give him a freedom to explore new adventures, to explore your world in new ways. And as he continues to embody your love and your grace, help us to follow in his footsteps and to step up into those areas of leadership that we may model his love and humility for others. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
So today, Dr. Patton will be speaking on the topic, sacred identity and the cult of celebrity. So I encourage you, keep track of questions you may have. There will be time for Q&A, but right now, would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Patton?
Before I even start, I want to tell two stories that kind of contextualize my passions about these things and passions for life. One of them chronicled in my musical junior high, which some of you have seen. It's a musical described as a musical with 4 chords, 3 acts and 4 chords. But it depicts a time, and in fact, the protagonist is why the internal protagonist, Benny Hopkins, is me. The torments of early adolescence, 7th grade. Oak Elementary. I was on the safety patrol, and some of you are old enough to remember when you had guys and gals going like this and saying, "Oh, let's go." And you could threaten younger kids with reporting that they jaywalked all along. But one time there was a fellow named Roger Strange who came and just sucker punched him. And I had really been profoundly blessed. I wrestled with my brothers, but never had the occasion of someone's fist introducing itself to my face. Well, it's like I really didn't know what to do. And before anything escalated, one of the lieutenants on the safety patrol rescued me, but this was not before I was surrounded by my peers who were looking for a fight. You know how we are. 15 degrees away from that gladiator war and stuff. And he shooed my bully, Roger Strange, away. And Roger's walking away from me, throwing humiliations over his right shoulder. And I'm walking home, David, going, when are you going to come back? Chuck, who was I speaking to? Blood on my face, tears running down my face. I was talking to the Lord, saying, can you come back before I have to go to school tomorrow? I knew that prayer. I meant it as passionately as I could. I didn't want to have to face the humiliation. Come on. The story is unstable. And it was with a great grace for me to launch into new levels of empathy. And to also know that God works profoundly through humiliation. And that God wants to work with the bullies within all of us. The other story is after I was in my 40s, I left the pastorate at Trinity Church in Livonia, Michigan. Not because of a scandal, although I was capable of scandal. We were all capable of scandal. Because my wife and I had started a theater in Livonia called Trinity House Theater in 1981. And the church I was pastoring was replete with artists, and they were wonderful, right? I was telling my pastoral friends at the time that, Terry, they were complaining about the congregations that would fall asleep during their sermon or criticize their three-point sermon. My congregation, full of critics, full of artists in a variety of ways, would wonder about not the third point, but why didn't I have the 37th point? Great congregation, electrifying, eccentric, very eclectic. But it was time for me to move on. I was 40 and I wanted to get more training in theater and in communication. It was the first time in my life where I had met actors at the graduate school level who were saying truly that they believed God had led them to go to Hollywood and change it. Great. Another young man said he was going to be the next Tom Cruise, Christian, of course. I never run into that. Oh, what is this vision? I run into a Tom, some with fellow pastors who felt, called to lead the next megachurch. They were going to rise up another kind of ministerial hierarchy towards that grand embrace called knownness. These are the two stories that will perhaps inform what I'm trying to present. And by the way, I've been working on this book for 5 years, and the wonderful Dr. Robert Woods, who is so profoundly prolific, has come alongside me in the last few years, and he's the kind of guy where you go, okay, Paul, this is what needs to happen. This is how this book needs to change and get ready for publication, and all you do is you go, okay. My younger brother, Robert Woods, who's my brother in many ways, and we miss him even though he's still on faculty here. But he's now living in the state of Washington with his president wife. Hail to the chief. But this lecture, Reframing Your Dance with Pop Culture, Sacred Identity and the Cult of Celebrity, attempts to assist its audience in sorting through the truths and half-truths, the events and pseudo-events, the realities and the manufactured images. And by the way, that's from Thomas Merton, who anticipated prophetically some of the problems we were going to have with the relationship of image and reality. Attempts to assist audiences in sorting through the truths and the half-truths, the events and the pseudo-events. Pseudo-events is a phrase Roger Borston's, from image, the guide to pseudo-events. In fact, my contention is the book to read to start to understand why this might be the crucible of your existence. The pseudo-events, the realities and the manufactured images of mass media saturation as they affect our sacred identity. After discussing the potentially assaultive media effects on sacred identity in terms of community, family, relationships, and the individual, I'll focus on the specific media-induced phenomenon of the cult of celebrity. It will remind you that we are a polytheistic culture in many profound ways. In my view, one cannot talk about a healthy, helpful exploration into our patterns with pop culture without bringing up the cult of celebrity, hosted by mass media, and the psychological smudge marks it leaves on our self-portraits. The lecture will end with biblically informed antidotes to aid in navigating wisely on what I call, metaphorically, the dance floor of the cult of celebrity. Finally, the lecture is strewn with the notion that pop culture and its mass-mediated offerings serve as a dominant arena in spiritual formation. How many have watched Dancing with the Stars at least once in their life? Okay. See that? The training says right? Premiered on ABC in 2005. That's basically pre-social media. Right. It became a broadcast staple for television networks, scrambling for viewers loyal to time-locked, advertising-drenched programming. You know, by the time you're 18, you've seen 18,000 video commercials. Welcome to the machine, said Roger Waters. Like the entertainment producers and moneymen of the ancient Roman Empire who constructed formulas guaranteeing the tens of thousands filling the amphitheaters and coliseums with entertainment satisfaction. And every time I say that word, entertainment satisfaction, I think of Mick Jagger. Satisfaction. I want entertainment satisfaction. That's fundamental. Some television producer pitched the networks with the following: I got an idea. How about a dance competition pairing professional dancers with celebrities? You got it. We'll watch anything, including celebrity croquet, because we're that bored. In contrast to the throngs gathering to witness the marathon dance contestants of the early 20th century, the millions gathered in front of their 83-inch flat screens would not be watching those longing to be discovered. Which, by the way, is the meta-narrative, the three-act structure behind the myth of the celebrity cult. Anonymity, Act 1. Discovered, Act 2. Ascension, Act 3. Okay? And every cultural myth that dominates has a three-act structure. And it helps us to order what would otherwise be a chaotic existence. Right? Anonymity, discovery, ascension. Dancing with the Stars featured those already existing in the city of refuge called knownness. The mass-mediated fame system offered to the anonymous millions an opportunity to watch the journey of the stars. The stars. The stars. Those who had already floated to the surface of mass recognition toward dancing superiority. The dance competition would feature fortified dancing professionals paired with the stars whose emanating light might have faded slightly, at least enough to allow for them to pencil into their schedules the chance to sweat, move, and groove to the beat of the pop tune surrounded by adoring cheers of the studio audience. In other words, these are not your busiest of celebrities. Of course, all the stars with whom we were dancing were bodily contoured to the culture standard of enviable perfection, with facial features chiseled to Disney princess and princely perfection. It just so happened that the dancing professionals paired with the celebrities generally matched the facial and bodily standards warranting our gaze. And make no mistake, we are conditioning our women and men to hate their bodies because they don't fall short, or because they do fall short of this standard of perfection. where the cult of celebrity and its mass-mediated systems of delivery don't exist in cultures, there are no social diseases like bulimia and anorexia that are killing us and killing confidence, godly confidence. Let me show you my tight habits. You don't want to get sick. The athlete celebrities are not just known for their knownness. And by the way, that phrase, Mr. Rayhill, is a phrase from Kenneth Burke. No, not Kenneth Burke. Roger Borston, when he, in his very wonderful introductory chapter, helping the culture in the early 60s understand the relationship of image and reality, in this great chapter called Heroes to Celebrities. John, you remember that he described celebrities as people known for their knownness. The athlete celebrities, not just known for their knownness, arrive on the dance floor from the convenience of their off-season or the short distance of retirement and past glories. It would also feature the reality show plot necessarily discovered 2 decades earlier. Each episode would feature the climactic departure of one pair of dancing contestants. It is a reminder that we are wired as suckers for stories, and not just the aesthetic pleasure of a dance move expertly maneuvered. We're suckers for stories, and the major dramatic question keeping us watching is who's going to get kicked off, hopefully not our babes. The second act of a simple but compelling plot line includes the tension and suspense attached to the next couple dismissed from the story. Goodbyes, especially to those we have deemed our favorites, are especially dramatic and make for riveting television. And the producers see to it that the show takes us behind the scenes to video clips of rehearsal slip-ups, frustrations, and celebrity exertion. These stars sweat like us, don't look quite as glamorous in their sweats, and turn impossible corners with hours of practice magically turned into half minutes of video clips for our viewing satisfaction. You hear my snort, Tom? Millions of us, and here is the tragedy. Millions of us had nothing better to do, including the possibility of dancing with the stars of our own personal existence. Like our marital partners, our friends, our neighbors, our kids. And by the way, I say to the next generation, one of the challenges I want to give to you is we've got to get better at redeeming the dance. What does it mean to dance as unto the glory of the Lord, and to celebrate, as it described in Nehemiah 8, our redemption, our salvation. Not just celebrating our ability through the public thrust we can measure each minute as to how good we can be at attracting a potential procreator. Do you get it? Do you get it? Do you know the costume that is required when you go to, in quotes, the club? What is it about the human experience that sets us up for the necessity of vicarious longing? What is it about our lot in 21st century techno-urban refugee camps that bestow upon anonymous throngs an obsessive desire to be someone else, somewhere else, with someone else? What is it about the human condition in the fragmented, hurried, and advertised-to postmodern environment that has many of us watching others dance on a screen much more than we dance ourselves? Spectator passivity does not typically lend itself to clarifying hints about who we are as individuals in the midst of masses. Why isn't that magical? By the way, I'm one who adheres to, and I wish I had the magical abilities of my dear friend Jen Lefferer. I was trying to channel you this morning as I was trying to put this together. Okay, let's just forget. Oh, but this is about all you're going to get. And partly is my philosophy that too oftentimes if they're too tricky, Jacob, then they become competition for the rhetor's confidence. Can you imagine Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech? Martin, could you go back? One more slide here. Default modes and watching. For those of you, my students, you know what I mean by default modes. What is it that you do when you have nothing else to do? What do you do when you find yourself emotionally agitated, especially by the emotional agitation of boredom, which Saul Bellow called the screech of unused capacities, right? As mentioned earlier in the book, a major default mode for many of us when facing emotional agitations is to turn our attention to the mass media. Whatever the motivation, be it relaxation, reward, random, and ritual viewing, we go through that in the earlier section of the book. In fact, it's a very good instrument of self-awareness, is to know why is it that I'm watching. What is it about the screen that beats the three-dimensional availability of my life around me? Whatever the motivation, the regular rhythm and accessibility of the media engagement shapes the contours of our imagination. In other words, what we deem possible, and our sense of place in the world. In other words, if as a default mode we are regularly viewing the narratives of any variety of television program or film, take for instance Dancing with the Stars. Regularly spectators to the artistic prowess and mass exposure of the stars, one similarly surrenders to the notion that realistically we can only spectate. And by the way, that's a very subtle, incremental grip. Do you know anyone who comes home from work and turns it on? Because there's nothing better to do. For those too young to actually participate, lacking the geographic access to entertainment production meccas, or the parents willing to move on actualizing dreams of stardom, if you really love me, Mom, the child adolescent can only wait for their discovery. Again, second act of the cult of celebrity narrative, right? There are dreams of becoming worthy enough in the hierarchical ladder of celebrity to warrant an audience's gaze. Similarly, if we are regularly viewing the compelling narratives of our favorite sports team, and by the way, I'm a sports addict. All sports, it's my relationship. I'm an alcoholic, and that's alcohol. Part of my, in the 12-step program, is trying to go to more live events. Right? I'd watch anything. By the way, I got a brother who was addicted to porn for 10 years. You know where his pornographic addiction started? In 1967, here on the bottom floor of Ormston. Yeah, 10 years. 10 years. You know what his therapist told him? Okay, what I want you to do, Steve, this is about 9th, 8th, 9th, 10th year of his addiction. And he's giving me permission to talk about this. The therapist said, look, I want you to wear when you go, and you're tempted to go to the adult bookstore, and then you have to go to your car and, go pick up the adult magazines, right? Take it to a clerk. Okay. This is what the therapist said. I want you to wear a Christian t-shirt when you go. Jesus adds life. Jesus is my Savior. I'll take that. Yeah. And then plaster your car with Christian bumper stickers. Similarly, if we are regularly viewing the compelling narratives of our favorite sports team, the athletic prowess of the professionals, we get quickly accustomed to the idea that the sport is to be spectated and rarely, if ever, something in which we participate. Our role becomes psychologically fixed. We are spectators who admire the prowess of professionals in performance, of the stars. This fixed role as a spectator of sport is affected by chronology. I know this is a shock to you, young people. If one is too young to participate professionally, many often dream of becoming worthy enough in performance to warrant a spectator's gaze. If one is too old, it becomes natural to reminisce of bygones, if-onlys, and what-ifs. I love to talk about that double I didn't get. Cultural analyst Cornel West observes that anything beyond moderate desire doses of spectatorship. Let me repeat this. One of my favorite cultural analysts. Cultural analyst Cornel West observes that anything beyond moderate doses of spectatorship lends itself to unhealthy passivity. Characteristically unable to engender the sustained energy and commitment to battle in arenas where our exertion can make a difference. We may be spending too much of our imaginative energies and attention on arenas in which we cannot affect the outcome. Watch this. Whoa. And who am I again? Leah, you know this. In the midst of the whirlwind of the activity of stars, I get so sick of that word. In the midst of the whirlwind of activities of the stars, of must-see award shows celebrating the over-celebrated, rolled out red carpets, video interviews asking our athletic heroes to tell us again how it felt to hit the home run and score the touchdown, we sit and watch and forget about what it means to be made in the image of God. Our face, ourselves, seem lost in a sea of billions of other faces. That's it in a sentence. The existential crisis before many of us. The confirmation and affirmations, if we can get it, of family and friends are nice. But what are they compared to the knee-deep adoration of the mass media celebrated? Can you say dwarfing effect? It's just that sometimes we feel dwarfed in the accomplishments of others. In our insecurity and associated envy, there's a longing for recognition. We really don't want to admit it, but there's a Pharisee in all of us that is chided, no, mocked by Jesus. And please remember that the prophets were great satirists and mockers, long before SNL got that. This cultural assignment. As we yearn for a more prominent place at the cultural table of celebrity. In Jesus' teaching at the Pharisees' house in Luke chapter 14, verses 1 through 11, the religious leaders chose for themselves a prominent place at the host's table. And by the way, I've always contended that Jesus probably had all of the Proverbs memorized. And his extemporaneous ability to size up this comic elbowing for the most prominent place. And you can imagine he's internally going, he's beyond any of the best SNL writers. This is funny. What's he drawing from? Proverbs 25. Do not exalt yourself in the king's presence. Do not claim a place amongst great men. Better for the king to say, come up here, than for him to humiliate you in front of a nobleman. Jesus was brilliant at calling out human presumption, particularly as manifest and colored by arrogance, right? Perhaps howling for greater recognition and honor. Even if recognition at the table were to be granted by the banquet's host, it would have only affirmed the presumption of the guest. And from Jesus' perspective, it was the presumption of the guest that was the problem. The setting is what we might recognize as a wedding reception. Long head table where the bride and groom sit. flanked by their wedding party of bridesmaids and best men. Typically closest to the head table is a smaller table where immediate family sits, parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. And if you are an invited guest, you have been reserved a seat at the reception to join in the wedding celebration. Your place might be at a table farthest away from the head table, at the outer fringes of the event. Wedding receptions have a way of reminding you of your place, don't they? But at least you got invited. Wedding receptions have a way of reminding you of your place, which is maybe one of the reasons why there's so much drinking at these events. It is like a concentric circle of significance. The center circle, the most prominent, surrounding the wedding party with surrounding rings of incrementally decreasing importance. Metaphorically speaking, we are typically not content with the seats we've been assigned. The wedding feast hosted by celebrity cult only rubs it in. Corporate ladder. I'm going to find out which star. The mass-mediated wedding feast, or hierarchy of renown, has a head table and standing room only for those masses relegated to the gazing fringes. Or maybe think of the party as a hierarchical ladder of cultural significance, and the millions allocated to the fringe are at the bottom rung. The human psyche can only take so much of this. Generally speaking, and by the way, my thoughts on our hierarchical Salve scale, and probably our English colleagues have studied Kenneth Berg. I mentioned this to Jeff earlier. By the way, the grandfather of Harry Chapin. Yes, Harry, Keep the Chains Chapin, for those of us old enough to remember when we stopped our car at that line. Harry Chapin, who died before he was 40 in a car accident driving a Rabbit, a VW Rabbit, gets run over by a truck. I'm 65. Why do I get to live 26 years longer than Harry Chapin? Generally speaking, a hierarchy is a ranking of people where each categorical level is subordinate to the ranking above it. Hierarchies are like rungs on a ladder. Think of it in terms of climbing the corporate ladder. You've heard the phrase. It is just that we are typically dissatisfied with our current status. And this is something that I contend we have to pray about and bring to God every day. It's just that we are typically dissatisfied with our current status, whether it's the hierarchical status of popularity in our middle school. Remember being 13? Remember that? Or let's say you're a minister and it's the hierarchy of power and status amongst pastors in your region. Congregational size does matter. All of us reside somewhere along the ladder in the various associations to which we are formally or informally belonging. Hierarchies of prominence or affection within family, work, church, or school dominate our sense of self. Again, it is typically human nature not to be content with one's rung on the ladder. For instance, hierarchies within family can strongly affect a sense of self if one sibling is favored over others. Think of Joseph's elevated status and the coat that symbolized his being favored, the symbol of affection easily resented by envious older brothers. We are Joseph's older brothers. Hierarchies at work, some are formalized by a system of rank. We all have bosses further up the ladder, while the others are more informal, the wittiest, most socially adept colleagues rising fast up the more unofficial ladder. Each of these hierarchical ladders is governed by ruling high priests, residing at the top rung. The priests and priestesses of the hierarchy govern to ensure a confirmation and submission to the existing order. Although not always a clumsy proposition, bosses in workplaces, parental figures in families, teachers in the classroom, are generally making sure we understand why they are further up the hierarchical chain. In hierarchies governing friendships, large group or small, think about your circle of friends who you have to trust. There is certainly an informal, generally unstated set of rules confirming the ranking and order of the social dynamic. If you forget the ranking of your prominence, you will eventually be reminded. If you are purposely define the order within the social clique, you probably need to be prepared to be put in your place. Challenges to the hierarchical order of things always come with a price tag. Always. The priestly rulers of the hierarchy preserve the symbolic values that place them prominently at the top. So, the middle-aged associate professor, struggling for tenure after failed attempts at publication, is shamed by the younger, rising academic star whose publication graces the cover of the field's dominant journal. Jeff and Jen, way to go. These young punks. Significant journal publication being a symbol of power within an academic hierarchy. And I know your students didn't think that we were a part of a very real hierarchy, informal. The veteran salesman, think death of the salesman, right? The veteran salesman feels marginalized by the flashier, hyper-energetic, and successful new hire. The self-marginalized adolescent wandering in the wilderness of the high school cafeteria knows the cafeteria table's available for lunch and the schoolmate's accessible for conversation. Do you remember seeing that pain? If you didn't experience it yourself. This team is subject to the dictates of symbolic power of beautifully contoured facial features, athletic chiseled biceps, or a hyper-developed logic of fashion perfection beyond her reach. Such high school pecking orders, ladders of significance and power, are the comic and dramatic backdrop of virtually every American movie depicting adolescent life. Name it. From Fast Times at Ridgemont High to Mean Girls. A sense of one's place along the hierarchical ladder is relatively clear for most. The cues and clues meted out with varying degrees of conspicuousness by the high priest at the top, the rulers, those winning in that hierarchy. Our lives are inescapably linked to such pecking order realities and the goading effects of those who dominate them. Most kindergartners with any developed sense of social radar will quickly size up their popularity and power status within the classroom pecking order. The high priests and priestesses will be identified as well as the symbols of kindergarten prominence. You don't have to be Robert Coles to do interviews with kindergartners and first graders to find out that that's true. Who's the most popular in your class? Why are they popular? Get their 5-year-old mouths to articulate that and you will be shocked. Boys might be a little bit behind girls. After conversations with hundreds of children from elementary through high school, I rarely met students who couldn't precisely chart the hierarchy of power in the kindergarten and identify their places in the pecking order. Furthermore, every experience, and I want you to experiment with this, every experience of feeling insulted. Think about the last time you felt insulted. And if you can't remember, wow! Well, you have a charmed, but at some level, maybe a little bit of a cursed life. Because feeling insulted can be an instrument of transformation. But, furthermore, every experience of feeling insulted, no matter what our age or circumstance, can easily be traced to the wounds of being demoted or dismissed from our self-perceived place in the pecking order of significance. In fact, whenever we experience being offended or feeling insulted, it gives us significant hint of our sense of identity, of who we view ourselves to be. Take those hints seriously. Log them. How often does it happen? Why? These are wonderful, in my view, I would argue, insights as to who you are and who you become. And it's why we can rejoice even in our defeats, in our humiliations. The experience is always an invitation to investigate and identify the hierarchical system in which we feel demoted. If we desire to clarify and strengthen our sacred identity, these insulting hints should be stewarded for all the potential information they store. By the way, if you don't keep a journal, start. Even as it relates to your, in quotes, dance with your pop culture engagement, including, why am I watching someone else dance? Try it out next time. Next time you get offended by someone, something that someone says or doesn't say. See if it's not rooted in feeling devalued, underappreciated, unjustly demoted from your perceived place or status in hierarchy. Even the difficult rite of passage known to millions as the midlife crisis can be understood as despondency over one's place along the success ladder, a despair and discontentedness related to the grievous falling short of aspirations launched at the beginning of the career path. By the way, I just quickly, I want to tell you that I think that the dominant, because I want to have some time for some questions, and maybe just listening, not answers. But I want to tell you about what I think is the dominant hierarchical reality in the Western culture. The most comprehensive, accessible, and intimidating hierarchical ladder in contemporary Western-style societies is that produced by the mass media land of Oz, christened Hollywood. Hollywood is an organism, not a city, engendering knownness. It commodifies knownness. It makes knownness a commodification. Engendering knownness through mass media systems of film, television, radio, and print. Its comprehensiveness speaks to Hollywood's shadow cast on all lesser and subservient hierarchies. It also speaks to the notion that everyone is included, from the masses of anonymous peasants at the bottom of the rungs of the ladder to the first name recognition of icons at the top. Other ladders of status are simply not comparable in their inclusivity. The 21-year-old is no longer in high school, no longer subject to the popularity and pecking order of adolescence. If you're a newspaper journalist, you're probably not a member of the plumbers union or a novice in a ballet academy. The retiree no longer cares about union rules or corporate promotion. He's out of that hierarchy. But I would suggest that he is not out, she is not away from the hierarchy of this organism called Hollywood. These hierarchies are inescapable, but Hollywood's omnipresent accessibility is almost inescapable. Everyone can access information regarding their hierarchical status from the push of a button on their laptop to the inadvertent gaze of a magazine cover. Accessibility available 24/7 hours per day, 7 days per week. The intimidating quality of the Hollywood hierarchy addresses its ability to constantly restate what participants, both the stars and the spectators, don't possess. The extent of their power to embody the dictatorial symbols of the hierarchy, and thus subject many throngs to the pangs of constant negative comparison. And the guilt-inducing high priest of this most comprehensive, accessible, intimidating hierarchy in Western society are the celebrities dwelling on the contemporary Mount Olympus of the organism we call Hollywood. This is not to impugn in any way the high priest's moral character, artistic, or political skills. They might be the most wonderful people that you've ever met. They might be the most gracious on the planet. Their artistic or political skills may be memorably formidable, but this is not the point. The point is, again, Kenneth Burke's terms, is that such priests will inevitably maintain the symbols of professional priestly usage. The ability to maintain such symbols, beauty, prominence, and profound levels of knownness is what makes them priests in the system. As long as they are able to demonstrate they embody the priestly symbols, their role as hierarchical priests is maintained. Their priestly roles are guilt-inducing because the symbols professionally maintained by the priest are characteristic of a non-celebrity masses who are subtly shamed for not possessing them. I describe three main characteristics of this dominant hierarchy that I call the organism Hollywood. But I'll skip through the last two because I'm running out of time. But in a book that I think I wish every student would read, and you can argue with him, Christopher Lasch, The Culture of Narcissism. Jimmy Carter read it, and David, he invited him to the White House. This is one of my shamans. It's partly part of my marching order. Early in his much heralded book, The Culture of Narcissism, Christopher Lasch asserted, the mass media, with their cult of celebrity and their attempt to surround it with glamour and excitement, have made America a nation of fans and moviegoers. Think of the book, The Moviegoer. Right? The media gives substance to and thus intensify narcissistic dreams of fame and glory, encouraging the common man to identify himself with the stars and to hate the herd, and making it more and more difficult to live with making it more and more difficult for him to accept the banality of everyday life. Stars don't have to take out the garbage. I do. There's more. Sometimes we speak in hyperbolic terms, right? Oftentimes, students and audiences that I work with about this, and I'm riotous about this. Some of the first things I say to do, and you've heard me, some of you have taken my class, monitor and moderate. In a journal, it can be electronic or manual. Monitor and moderate how much time is spent on screens. And then ask why. I've even had students ask, can we start a 12-step group on this? Because I realize I'm addicted to screens. Every emotional agitation, boom, either the first or second screen. Not unlike that description in Matthew 20, where the person's standing around all day waiting for someone to hire them because they have nothing to do, no one's hired them. That's the first thing. Monitor, moderate the time you're spending with screens. We are called to be sanctified, growing in our holy wisdom as consumers, creators, critics of the system. And sometimes it's a system that wants you agitated. You know why? So you'll be a better consumer. Because it seems that we're better consumers, especially in fashion, if we're agitated by our look, an agitation that's provoked by the posing of the Hollywood stars. Questions?
Don't be shy.
I'm going to be, Dear Dory has invited me to teach next year. I'll be teaching in the spring of lecture class, and in the fall in theory class, and then advanced acting class. But I get to be here, my favorite campus, my favorite area, my favorite state. Yeah, David, I know you're moving, and we're going to miss you greatly. But, any questions? Right? Yeah, John. Okay, John Hawthorne, I better be ready. I love our brothers and sisters. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul, for all this. I appreciate, obviously, this was like the hierarchy thing.
Yeah.
What thoughts do you have, in addition to the monitoring, the mediating, the not letting yourself be captured in the spectatorship? Any thoughts on how to subvert the existing hierarchy? Take 2 minutes if you
First thing I would say is avoid all award shows. That's like eating 17 cupcakes with somebody who has sugar diabetes. Celebrating the overly celebrated. I tell actors, Oscars, give me a freaking break. Woody Allen, who gets an award nomination and gets the Oscar and doesn't even show up. He's playing his clarinet. Right? Clifford, was it, won the Academy Award? He won the Academy Award for his role. Clifford Robertson didn't even show up. Now, I know the Academy makes you show up now, okay? And I get it. But I would say, unless you have to show up because of a nomination, I would say, don't waste your time. Work on your screenplay. Work on your acting skills. Work on your visual art. Work on your research skills. Work on your athletic skills. Okay? As much as is possible. One of the ways to subvert the call is to focus on your own art. By the way, I would say this, and it's in the lecture, it's in the book. One of the two specific antidotes I give from Middle Ages, de Sales, Francis de Sales, his old lesson: don't sow your desire in someone else's garden, just cultivate your own garden. And learning the attitude of longing to be someone else, somewhere else, with someone else, is a disservice to the moment you're in. That's a cultivated invasion. This is godliness with contentment is great gain. Also, great gain. And the system, however inadvertently, it's not like somebody's in a focus group going, "Oh, let's get to the discontent." But it is a system that contributes to discontent. Does that help? Yes. Correct.
How do you effectively monitor and moderate? Do you have any advice on like how to effectively monitor and moderate when like your work, like say for school or for your job, requires you to be on the screen?
That doesn't count. Like if you're a screenwriter, if you work in the business, okay, that's your work. But know that you also need Sabbath and be mindful about it. Be mindful about your Sabbath. It's not mindless. We talk in the book about the cultivation of two other sacreds. Sacred intentionality, which is something that would more directly address your question, Rebecca, and then sacred interiority. For instance, the best antidote for when you're waiting in the grocery store line. By the way, think about 7 and 8-year-old kids being able to look at the headlines of Cosmopolitan. We teach our little girls and little boys very, very young, right? It's about being able to sustain sexual longing. 12 seconds. That's who you really want to be. But sacred interiority. I learned this at 40 when I left the pastorate. And while you know this, I was no longer getting paid for writing sermons, which I realize in retrospect were strictly at best C+, B-. I have tapes. I think I go through, right? I started memorizing as a student actor at 40 years old. Started memorizing scripture daily. That was in 1990. Still do it. Why? Because, like the psalmist says in Psalm 1, his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law that they meditate day and night. We delight in what we do regularly, what we find success in, and what we find accessible. Bruce delights in being in the chemistry lab. You delight in solving business problems. Tennis players delight in being on the court, right? What does it take to delight in being engaged in God's Word? When it's regularly, and you can anticipate some success, not always because I got to get something out of it. But when you have cultivated sacred interiority, you have things that you have decided that are worth remembering, and you're practicing remembering them, you can go through that aisle without being distracted by Paula Patton's dress that's too tight. Because the headline will ask you, is it too tight? You be the judge. Distractions. How do you keep them when you have things to think about?
I've never asked you this question, Paul, so I'm going to ask it publicly. Describe your first encounter with gas station TV.
Oh, man. This is one of my favorite things to mock. What I want you to do the next time you hear that is hear the copy about what it says it is, providing you with exciting experiences every time you shop. What? I just started laughing. And got in my car and rolled up the windows. I got enough to think about. Don't you? Oh yeah. It was. It's going to show up in some screenplay perhaps. Gas station TV. By the way, I want you to know, and some of my students have heard me rant on this, but don't take this sitting down. Basically every female model that's selling something has the same body type. The same body type. There's no difference. Now we've grown, in the wisdom of the civil rights era. And there are even some women of color. They have the same body type. Don't take that sitting down. Don't take that seat.
Thank you, Paul. We are in a time and an age where it's easy to go to sleep and slumber our way through life. And what we've heard this morning, a true prophetic voice who calls us to shake aside the numbness, and there is hope, as you've heard. So would you join me in thanking Dr. Paul Patton?